Hey Bellevue, it's Bellevue Inspired with Mr. Ott. We're here on a Wednesday, kind of a cold and dreary Wednesday. Not sure if I will be doing as much outdoor stuff today as indoor. This week we're talking about the topic is emotional intelligence and specifically emotional development among children. As children go through various ages, they're dealing with various things in their emotional development, and that's important for families and parents especially to know because you got them more than we do at this point, and you're going to see some of these stages played out in more detail than you might have had school been in session. So I hope the information is useful to you. So far, we've covered the birth to 3, and we remember that we talked about what every kid needs is a perfect family. That would be best for a kid, and that means they experience perfect love from a mom and dad who love each other perfectly. Nobody gets that. But a lot of our emotional wiring is done by the time we're 3 years old in terms of how we're going to process or react to things. And embedded in that are some emotions related to insecurity or unmet needs. And those are things like sadness and anger and anxiety and some of these things that are challenges for all of us to deal with. So then when they move into the preschool age and into early elementary, there's a lot of imaginary play as kids are working out how emotions work. They're trying to figure out how relationships work. And so there's a lot of imaginary play, very important for kids to engage in and for us to reinforce and even participate in at times, because this is how kids are working things out that they're not able necessarily to explain to themselves in a verbal way. As they play, they're actually learning about how the world works. And it's one of the ways that they're processing some of their more challenging emotions, shall we say. Now, as kids get a little bit older into what we would call a little bit later childhood, the verbal part of their brain, the language part of their brain, and the ability to tell themselves a story instead of necessarily playing the story gets a little bit bigger. And here's what we know, and I know it's true for you, it's true for me, it's true for kids. Nobody really wants to feel angry or sad all the time or anxious. Nobody really wants to experience those feelings all the time. When we experience those feelings as people, we've got to figure out what to do about those feelings because we don't want to stay with them. Well, when kids are in this later childhood age, as they're working through play still and still trying to figure out how things work, they're also developing some strategies of what to do with these negative feelings or when they experience negative feelings in their environment. Now, when I say negative feelings, I don't mean that it is bad to be angry or to be sad. These are all real emotions, but they're the ones that when we experience them, they can make us uncomfortable and we try to move away from them. They prompt us to do something to level ourselves out and to get to a place where we don't feel those things. Well, little kids in their later childhood begin to tell themselves a story about why things are the way they are, and they develop an inner dialogue about, and sometimes this is conscious and sometimes it really isn't. It's just something that they're doing about how do I not feel this way? What strategy I'm going to use? And as adults, if you're watching this and as an adult, you did this when you were this age. You developed a sort of strategy to cope with your unmet needs and insecure emotions. And everybody does it. In a sense, this is where we kind of refine our personality. We can see the orientation, the kind of ways kids are when they're younger. But in this age, we really begin to define ourselves in terms of how we're going to solve these problems, how we're going to make sense out of the world that we've been given. Now, that can take all sorts of forms. Some kids develop a personality where they're saying, well, maybe if I just try to be super helpful all the time and always cheerful, then everything will be better in my environment and I will feel better. Or some kids are a little bit more bold and they're like, you know what, maybe if I just come into space and I am the presence and everybody's going to notice me and respond to my needs, then I will be able to respond to the environment I've been given and take care of some of these feelings. Now, there's all different kinds. Some kids become like little miniature clowns. I'll just make everybody laugh and then everything will be fine. One of the things you can ask yourself as a parent during this stage, or even with any of your children who have passed this stage, is what is the certain personality or way of dealing with the world that your child developed during this stage or is developing in order to get their needs met and feel secure and stable in their environment? Because kids are doing a lot of that during this age. Now, a little bit later, and early adolescence and then in late adolescence, it becomes more complex as our brains develop and we're able to process things at a more abstract level and think a little deeper about things. And then there's the whole dreaded hormonal supercharge that comes emotionally with adolescence. We'll talk about that over the next couple days. But for today, in later childhood, kids will continue to play to work out their emotions. They need to play. Kids will need to have play experiences and experiences apart from the screen in order to learn to regulate and process their emotions. And during this stage, kids are developing a story about themselves, about what kind of a person they are, and about how they can best manage and explain and make sense out of the environment that they've been given. You can help them do that by providing good feedback, giving them good, solid boundaries that they have to work with and bump up against, and that unconditional acceptance that a birth to 3 kid needs, a 4.5 to on our little map that we're doing. I'll throw that up there, like a preschooler to early elementary needs. Well, all along the way, kids need it. And in fact, we know that we need it as adults too. So I, again, hope this is helpful in just understanding maybe some of the things your kids are going through. If you have any questions, of course, you can always give me an email. I'm in the Bellevue system, so I'm easy to get a hold of. jimott@bellevue.k12.iowa.us. We will talk to you tomorrow about the early adolescence period, and then we'll close out the week talking about later adolescence. Have a great Wednesday.